Hi there, my name is David Santander. Thank you all for joining me. I'm a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture, and you're witnessing, experiencing, joining us in part two of our investigation into traditional Chinese medicine and the commonly practiced yoga asana practice of the sun salutation. And because the reason that I wanted to go into this is that it's one of the most ubiquitously common posture-based yoga practices that you'll find in the United States at the time of going to press, at least in my opinion. And the mechanisms of traditional East Asian medicine I find fascinating. And I think that there's a lot to unpack of what's actually happening in here if you were to look at this through the traditional East Asian medicine lens, looking at this yoga practice through Chinese medicine and the qi dynamics and the things that are happening with the qi or the metabolic force of the body and even the structure of the body. So we're going to investigate the intersection between yoga, Qigong, which is breath, mind, body based practices from the Chinese medicine perspective as an oversimplification. I know people are going to hate this, call it Chinese yoga, and the physical manipulation practices of Qigong or other postural corrective techniques in East Asian medicine. And the reason that I want to investigate that kind of intersection, or the reason why I'm pulling the physical into that, is because I think this particular sequence of um, yoga actually really helps to integrate the physical form of the body. And that's part of why people feel so great, as if it were more than just stretching in their high school gym or their middle school gym. It seems like there's some other sort of magic that's happening behind that makes you feel euphoric and wonderful. That's beyond just a regular quote unquote workout, or it's beyond more than just quote unquote stretching. There's something else that's happening here, and I think this might help us kind of put our fingers on that, or at least look at it in another way, or even just shake up some more knowledge and understanding, and or some more questions so that we can continue learning and growing. So, um, I hope this is interesting to you, and if not, then what am I going to do? So, if you just give me a minute here, I gotta move some cords around and make sure stuff is plugged in so that we don't die halfway through. There we go. All right. So now I'm going to share, and if you're just listening and you're not watching, that's great too. I'm going to do my best to cue you in. If you're watching, then that's also great, and I'm glad in whatever format you're joining us. It's a very weird thing to talk to people in the future who aren't in the room, who are listening to this in whatever medium they may be. So I'm going to try and make this as approachable to all levels and all mediums as possible. I may say some stuff that may strike you as wrong or you don't agree with, or even time and science changes and our understanding evolves, and it maybe or I'm just wrong about something, and that's fine, and that's part of the process that's going to happen. Now, when I started talking about this project a few minutes ago, or in the first video, which if you're watching it strung together is a few minutes ago, and if you're watching it asynchronously, then who knows? But started this as a physical orthopedic investigation, but we quickly got into the acupuncture meridian dynamics and the chi dynamics of what's happening. And I think that's another testament to the fact that those things are inextricably linked, and my American mind is still trying to reconcile that. But anyway, we're going to look at the intersection between all of those and just kind of be open to whatever happens. I've got a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, and there's a lot of stuff happening here. So if it seems like there's a lot and maybe it's not well organized, that's because there is a lot and it's not well organized. This is kind of the first unfolding of all of this. Now, or at least in me bringing this to you. So thank you for bearing with me in that. And this is going to be like a croissant or like beef jerky, right? You've got a lot of layers to a croissant. There's folds and folds and folds. So you fold two, you fold two and a half, it makes four. You fold four and a half, it makes eight. You fold eight and a half, it makes eight. On and on and on. a lot of the stuff, there's these foldings and there's these recapitulations of ideas. So if I sound repetitive, that's good. It means you're hearing these techniques over and over again. It's going to start sinking in. If it sounds completely confusing, you have no idea what's going on, then that's great too, because there's a lot to learn here. If you are hearing these ideas, you've got the 5 elements down, or you've got the yin yang down, you've got it all down, you've breezed through it all, and you understand it, know that this is like beef jerky. A lot of these concepts and these ideas you've got to chew on for weeks, months, years to really get the juice out of it, to really get the flavor out of it, the nourishment. And much like gardening, if you throw all these seeds in the soil, you have all these practices that you start. It just takes time for this stuff to develop, as my teacher would say, time in the ranks. So the more time you spend learning this stuff, the more time you spend sitting with it, and you got to give it time to unfold and to develop and to inform you of what it has for you. It's really a beautiful and magnificent thing, and it's very humbling. So let's jump into looking at the sun salutation here, and we'll start to go through the forms and look at what's happening. So from a zoomed out point of view, we have, we're just, those of you who are just listening, we've pulled up pictures of the sun salutation, and I'll try to narrate our way through it. And those of you who are looking, we're looking at this kind of first row here in first and second round. This is just an image I pulled off the internet from this website listed here in the corner, and it's not perfect. None of it's perfect. Doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be. So we talked about the Liu He briefly, or if I'm forgetting and we haven't, then here we are talking about the Liu He. The Liu He is the Chinese term for the 6 harmonies, or the 6 joists, or the 6 unities in the body. And what that refers to are the 6 unifying points where you have this 2 sides come together, right? This of your perception, right, of the world, right? The world as we know it. To the 2 sides, left and right, meets together in the center. Up and down meet on that flat plane, and front and back meet along the sides, right? So that's sagittal, coronal, and transverse. Right? Those 3 planes make that's the union of those 6 places, hence 6 unions, 6 harmonies, right? These things coming together in harmony. And much of what the physical and spiritual practices of Buddhism, and there's a lot of it passing back and forth between Buddhism and Hinduism and yoga and Kung Fu and Chinese medicine and probably even Ayurveda, which is far beyond what I could ever talk about. That's not at all my area of expertise, but I'm just coming to look at this with you. So these practices are about being in the here and now, right? Not dwelling in the past, not dwelling in the future, but being present and aligning oneself and balancing oneself in these 3 planes so that we have ourselves correctly situated between heaven and earth. We're not leaning too far forward or too far back, and too far to the left, too far to the right. We're just perched neatly in the 3-dimensional space in a way that's energy efficient and causes less pain. Simple, 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 simple. Simple, not always easy. And there's a lot of stuff in that we're going to unpack, hopefully, over the course of the next 100 million millennia. So here we have a series of folding and unfolding and twisting and untwisting that's meant to make sure that the right side isn't squinched up and the left side too long, to make sure that there's not a twist, twisting clockwise or counterclockwise if you're looking down at the looking down at the top of the head, and making sure that we're not twisted, we're not folded. My teacher used to say that we are beings that exist in the fabric of the universe, and we are like a bundle in a sheet or a shirt, for example, right? We have this little twist, and if you're just listening, I'm putting a twist in my shirt, and we think we're this little twist, we think we're this one unitary thing, but if you unfurl that, we're part of this fabric of everything. And this is about trying to understand our place in that and about unkinking ourselves and physically like unfolding, unbunching the bunches and unfolding the folds and bringing ourselves to this nice, smoothed, even plane. So it's a little bit hard to articulate. It's a little bit hard to see at first glance, but, or maybe you grok it right away, and that's great too. So we talked about lifting up the arms and how much is signified in that movement. We have these elements, we have these chi principles that we're going to talk about. For example, harmonizing the liuhe, right? Bringing the 6 harmonies into balance. Now, I should also mention here, as we're talking about principles, that the liuhe exercise in traditional Chinese Qigong is about mixing. It's the practice looks like this. Just, and if you're just listening, then that's fine. Where you have this transverse plane down the middle. Transverse, whatever the line down the front is, right? We have this relationship where our 2 shoulders relate to one another, and our hip points relate to each other, and then our elbows relate to elbows, and our knees relate to our knees, and then our wrists relate to our wrists, and our ankles relate to our ankles. That's the left to right relationship. Then we have a top to bottom relationship where our shoulders connect to our hips. They relate to, that's that relationship there. Our elbows have a relationship to our knees, and our wrists have a relationship to our ankles. And you go through flexing each of those individually. And then the third is a diagonal relationship where our shoulders and our hips have a right shoulder, left hip has a relationship, right elbow, left knee has a relationship, and right wrist and left ankle has a relationship. And the same applies for the left shoulder, right hip, left elbow, right knee, left wrist, right ankle. And what the practice looks like is yearning the shoulders and the hips together, right? Left and right coming together, left and right coming together, and then elbows and knees come together, left and right coming together, and then then wrists and ankles yearning together. Then you do the same for top and bottom, shoulders and hips come together, elbows and knees come together, and wrists and ankles come together, and then the diagonal. The shoulder goes to the opposite hip, elbow goes to the opposite knee, wrist goes to the opposite ankle, and then you do the other side. Shoulder goes to opposite hip, elbow to opposite knee, wrist to opposite ankle. And that is the liuhe practice in traditional Chinese Qigong. So while you're not necessarily doing that exact practice in these sun salutation sets, you do have an investigation of those relationships, the diagonal relationship, the top to bottom relationship, the left to right relationship, occurring in each of these sets and throughout this constellation of different movements. So you have the first movement is stretching up, and you're creating a relationship, right? If you reach both your hands up, now we're expressing the relationship between top and bottom and left and right. Now the bending down. Now we have a top and bottom relationship. Your wrist grabs your ankles, your elbows are near your knees, and your hip and your shoulder are in a different relationship to each other. Especially if you're doing that kind of roll down, you're bringing that shoulder as close as it can get to your hips. If you bend backwards, there's a connection where your shoulders are getting close to your hips, which you can see expressed in a contortionist doing like a scorpion back bend. I don't know if that's the right term for that, but it doesn't matter. Okay, and then we go into a lunge where we reach a leg back, right? Now we're starting to investigate that diagonal dynamic, the diagonal dynamic. And then we go back to a down dog, which is similar to that upright position where we've now squared again. So we've investigated briefly one aspect of the diagonal dynamic and the top and bottom and the left and right dynamic. So that's just in, and then we go through the chaturanga, up dog, back to down dog, and then a lunge again. Now we've investigated the other side of that diagonal dynamic, and then fold in half, and top to bottom dynamic, standing up, left and right dynamic. So Um, Now the Tadasana pose is interesting, where you just stand, right? You just stand. Why do they call it mountain pose? And this has always been fascinating to me. This might not even necessarily be chi dynamic or physical structure relationship, but more of an esoteric meditation. So in Taoism and in Buddhism, they view that they cosmicize the body, meaning they sort of superimpose an understanding of the universe or a physical landscape, using that to understand the body or seeing the body as that landscape, or to integrate oneself into the world, to integrate oneself with all of the world around us. So there's a visionary exercise where you envision this mountain coming up, and the peak of the mountain sits in your heart, and you're standing upon the top of the mountain at the center of the universe, the mountain Shumi, and you're standing on that mountain. You're doing the exact same practice inside as you are doing outside. One of those practices is the Huang Di Infuching, which is we'll talk about another time. But that's another three-dimensional space, time and place practice too. But you're standing on that mountain, the mountain. So why do they call it mountain pose, as this sort of like fundamental pose that you return to? I'm wondering if there's a connection between that concept of this mountain envisioning yourself on the mountain while you do your practices, and that exact pose. Very interesting. Boat pose is another one like that too, quote unquote boat. And okay, another disclaimer here. Names. I don't know what all the names of these poses mean. I'm gonna butcher the names, and I'm so sorry about that. I'm learning, I'm trying, but I am not an expert in that at all. Um, so I am sure that there's a lot of secret stuff packed into these names, and I would love, for somebody else to share insight on that. That'd be really great to unpack and talk about that. But anyway, back to our regular scheduled programming. So we have the concepts like I just talked about, the Liu He, the six harmonies, these chi principles that are being capitulated. We also have acupuncture meridians. The acupuncture meridians are lines of relationship throughout the body. For example, in the arm, on the lighter hairless side of my arm, right, the quote unquote inside or the front, depending on which way you're holding your arm or what your anatomical reference point is. But you have the pale, hairless skin. For me, it's pale, and then you have the darker skin, the hairier skin, the rougher sort of outside skin. Now, on the softer inner, right, the palmar surface of the hand running up that inner surface of the arm, you have the heart, pericardium, and the lung meridians, and they run from the chest down to the fingers. And then on the back of the hand, you have the large intestine, Sanjiao or triple warmer, and the small intestine meridians, and those runs from the fingers down to the face. And then the face, you have the gallbladder, stomach, and urinary bladder meridians that run from face to down to the feet, either down the front, the side, or the back of the body, down to the feet. And then on the inner side of the legs, on the insides of the legs, those meridians again run around the outside and posterior side of the leg, and then around the softer inner sides of the legs, we have the three yin meridians that come up the leg that are they go into the torso, the kidney, the spleen, the liver meridians, right? And those are lines of relationship. Those are the acupuncture, quote unquote, channels. Those are the places where the acupuncture points are. The points are really anatomical holes that you can reach a needle into and activate in this little cave, this anatomical negative space, if you will, where you can access the chi. You can sort of open and close valves in a way. You can up and down regulate different metabolic parts of the body. You can it's like plumbing or electricity or clogging and unclogging, traffic, or different, what do they call traffic going to and from cities, right? They call them arteries. So there's a lot of crossover there with the physical dynamic, the looking at the community dynamic, looking at the way society is structured dynamic, and imposing that into the body, and vice versa, and seeing the connection inside and outside. But anyway, we are looking at acupuncture meridians and how they're, we can get into the weeds really fast and how they change in relation to movement here. So for example, you're just standing straight, and you, in the first part of the practice, right, the lifting up of the arms, you have the armpits being opened up. You have the arms coming up over the head, and that's going into an anatomical position. In East Asian medicine, actually, the anatomical position is with the arms up overhead, not with the arms down to the side. So it's going right into anatomical position, which is interesting, I think. And the palmar surfaces of the body are expressed, and the underside of the arm is lifted, where the underside of the arm is exposed upwards. So normally your arms are down as you're just walking around doing stuff, but now we're lifting our arms up. So we're inverting the natural process, and we're opening and expressing the heart meridian, the pericardium, which is the protector and the wrap around the heart, and the lung, which governs the chi of the body. So in the first movement, we're expressing our heart, we're expressing our chi, and we are extending the emotional dynamic and the chi dynamic in that first movement, which I think is very interesting. So for example, if I were to take my hand and hold, you can do this too if you want, you just hold your hand out in front of you. If you flex your wrist so that the back of your hand, right, the wrist where your wristwatch would sit, if you shorten that, you make an angle there, and you flex your hand back, bringing your fingernails towards your face, you're expressing the yin meridians. You're expressing the soft underbelly, the yin of that arm, and those yin meridians are being lengthened. So what do we have there but a principle called biao, embrace yang? The yang is being embraced and shortened. Bao yang, biao yin, expression of yin. So we're embracing the yang and we're expressing the yin in that one movement. Hold your hand out straight, like you're gonna poke somebody in the nose with your middle finger. You flex your wrist back, fingernails towards your face. Now you have, again, like we just said, expressing yin, embracing yang. If you flex the palm down towards your belly, now we have the opposite. We have embracing yin, bao yin, biao yang, expressing yang, because now the yang surface has become longer. Those meridians are now longer than they used to be. It's like taking a riverbed and lengthening it. Same amount of water, maybe, right? But we're also changing the way that meridian flows by moving it. Funky stuff, huh? So as we have our first movement, right, arms come up, and then now we bend down forward. Now we're lengthening the posterior aspect of the body, and now we need to talk about yin and yang. So we have so much stuff happening in these movements. I want to keep it simple, but there's just so much happening. As you bend over, you're lengthening the backside of the body, the posterior, the dorsal aspect of the body. Your spine is bending forward, your hamstrings are lengthening, and the posterior aspect of the body is being asked to stretch, right? So now we have the yang, the posterior, okay, so in looking at yin and yang, we have masculine, feminine, up, down, hot, cold. We have these oppositional dynamics. Soft is the yin, hard is the yang. Nourishing is the yin, moving is the yang. Right? There's these dynamics, and we're not one or the other. We're never just masculine or feminine. We're never just hot or cold. We're the interplay of these dynamics, And you can choose to embrace one or embrace the other, but we must clearly differentiate between yin and yang. When we're being yang, we be yang. When we're being yin, we be yin. We want to understand those dynamics, clearly differentiate those dynamics, and that helps us understand the interplay of those dynamics. Make sense? So when you bend forward, you're lengthening the posterior aspect of the body, and you're lengthening the yang meridians, the yang, the part of the body that is exposed to the sun if you're bending down and working in the fields. A lot of this stuff is based on the frame of reference of the common people in an agrarian society. So the part that's exposed to the sun while you're working all day long, that's the yang. The chest and the inside of the legs, the underside of the arms, that stuff that's not really exposed if you're bending down and working in the fields, that bit is the yin. That's the bit that's in the shade, right? So yang is the sunny side of the hill, yin is the shady side of the hill, plain and simple. So when we're asking the body to bend forward, and we bend forward, we're expressing the yang surface has become longer, biao yang, and the yin surface has become shorter, biao yin. So now we're embracing the yin. Then we go into a situation where one leg is extended, right? We go into that lunge. So that lunge, we're bringing that leg forward. We're extending our yin is kind of expressing now. And if you bend way back, the yin is really expressing. But if you're just going to a lunge where you're sort of kind of long and straight, then it's not really going into that dynamic. And when you go into the down dog, right, you have a certain amount of your posterior aspect, which is your yang side, which is extending. But now we're also extending the chest. We're opening the chest in a way, which is expressing the yin. And to further emphasize this point, we're going to fast forward to the upward facing dog, or the cobra, right, where you're lengthening the anterior aspect of the body, or the forward lunge, where you're lengthening the front, the yin, right? You're lengthening the front of that leg, the front of that quad, up into the ribs, up into the neck. All that whole front anterior yin aspect of the body is stretching. So now there we are expressing yin and embracing yang. So if you're doing both of those, we have something called yin yang tiazhi, which is the regulation of yin and yang. So now we're expressing each and we're embracing each. And that's the circle with the squiggly line and the two dots, the taiji thing, the taiji picture. That's yin yang and regulation with each other. So the sushang, the four manifestations of being. Now, what is the sushang? What is the four manifestations of being? What does that mean? What does that look like? Another gigantic principle. This entire martial arts and philosophy, philosophical traditions and alchemical traditions that are based on this aspect. We have the yang, the sunny side of the hill. We have the yin, the shady side of the hill. But on the shady side of the hill, there's a light, which is the yang within the yin, and on the sunny side of the hill, there's a shadow, which is the yin within the yang. Okay, so if you've ever heard of the Punnett Square, or the Prisoner's Dilemma, or looked into any of these fourfold relationships, you have let's say A and B, right? You have two A's, then you have A and B, then you have a B and A in the third quadrant, and then a B and B in the fourth quadrant. You have four different manifestations of these two ideas. So you have yang, yang, yang yin, yin yang, and yin yin, right? So those are four different manifestations, four different recapitulations of the same idea of yin and yang. What happens when yin and yang meet each other, and how do they transform? You have the four seasons there. You have the foundation of judo, which is the investigation of emptiness and fullness, and softness and hardness, which are aspects of that dynamic as well. We could talk about that ad nauseum just forever. And there's so much in that that I can't even unpack at this point in life. I haven't even unpacked it myself. But that's the expression of yin and yang, and that's the regulation of yin and yang as expressed in this practice, as expressed in the sun salutation, as it's you feel like a certain kind of balance after a practice like this. You feel a certain kind of regulation, right? You're breathing out, you're breathing in, you're breathing out, you're breathing in. Twist the left, twist the right, bend backwards, bend forwards. That is the regulation of the Sushang. That's the regulation of the four manifestations of being. You have aspects of hard, you have aspects of soft. You breathe in, you breathe out. At the same time, we're realigning that Liuha relationship, the relationship of the six. So there's all these things that are happening simultaneously. It's really fascinating. That's why I want to unpack this with you guys. So that is the sort of an intro into Qigong principles and an intro into the movements of the meridians. Now, we haven't even gone into more sophisticated twisting movements with a half bend where one leg is out and one leg's to the side, and your right foot goes around your back and up your nose, and your arm goes between your legs and then back around to where it started. And all these really sophisticated movements create sophisticated, would require more ornate narrations of everything that's happening. And we can go you can go super in depth with that kind of thing. Is it necessary to gain the benefits of yoga or Qigong through doing that? No, not necessarily. But I do think people find this kind of thing interesting. And if that's you, then you're in the right place. And if not, I'm sorry that you must be so bored and confused right now. But I'm going to stop here. And we're going to go in again and break this down a little bit more. We've still not even gone into the third round, Surya C, Surya Namaskaras, number C, number C. But with the lunge and with the triangle and with the warrior pose and the humble and the backwards warrior and the forwards warrior and all these, there's just so much here that I just have to stop here and get realigned and try and stay on one topic. But anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. I hope it's interesting to you, and I hope you are pleased as we unpack this kind of thing, and I hope it enriches your practices. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. Have a fantastic day.